Good afternoon, you all. I am having a really hard time recording this video for you, and so what I'm going to do is break it into probably 5 or 6 even segments of video so that hopefully I will be able to finish it and post it today. I can't tell y'all how much time I've spent not getting it done, and that's always challenging, and I know it is for you too. What I wanted to do though was animate this PowerPoint or provide some video with it so that maybe you can look at it, consider it before you complete your activity D that's due on Monday night, and also just think about some of these concepts, or we can think about them together in terms of teaching writing to children who haven't experienced a lot of success as writers. You probably can tell I'm working from my home office today. I have lots of little animals around me. I have a cat over here that Dr. McCaleb is responsible for me having. I have a couple of little dogs. So, as you all know, I am not a professional videographer, and who knows what could happen while we're recording this or what you might hear or see. So we'll just go from there. Just like I do in class, I've got some tea, and I'll be drinking that as I'm making this video. A couple things by way of introduction that I want you to think about. The first one is that many children learn in school that they aren't effective writers. And what I mean by that is very young children will often tell you that they can read before they can write. And they do that because, they scribble stuff on paper and then they say, this says, I went to visit my grandmother this weekend. She made chocolate pie. We had a good time, right? So what that tells us is that even very young children are making that connection that, writing puts your thoughts on paper and provides an outlet for you to communicate your ideas. Unfortunately, what happens as children get to school is they begin to equate their writing with their ability to spell, their ability to punctuate, and the emphasis on writing for communication loses its power. And that does not have to happen. Now, I am not saying that we don't focus on writing conventions because we clearly need to, and the research says that we ought to spend about 20% of our time in writing instruction working on those conventions. But that gives us 80% of our time to spend on working with the communication of ideas and assisting children in finding their voices to know that there are things that they can write about and ideas that they can share and beginning to see themselves as a community of writers. I'm going to share a piece of work with you that I've kept for probably the last 15 or 20 years. It's a very old piece of writing. The little girl who did this is probably in her 30s now. It came out of a research project that I did many years ago, focusing on development of literacy skills in bilingual special education classrooms. And this little girl who came to school not speaking English as her native language, who was identified very early on as having a learning disability, is in about second grade when she writes this piece. And she's in a classroom with a teacher who is working on engaging children in the writing process. And a lot of the focus was on helping children to become more empowered as writers. So the title of this piece is The Lawyer, and I think this is supposed to say by Genevieve Torres, but B. Genevieve Torres would also be okay, and I think you'll see what I mean when I share her work. So this is the text of this piece. It says, this is Genevieve. She is a lawyer. She helped people, and she is a good one too. She helps in case some people got in an accident. Now you can tell that there are certainly writing conventions that Genevieve has not yet incorporated into this piece. Although she did get that apostrophe and the word "gots" in the right place, which I think is pretty impressive. But clearly there's not any other punctuation in this piece. There are some inconsistent use of capitalization. There are some things that are not spelled perfectly. But I want to show you the illustration that Genevieve did to go with this. And she did draw this herself. She did get her teacher. You can see that Genevieve is sitting in a chair at a desk. Chair has rollers on it. She has a tremendous number of writing utensils in some sort of container in front of her. She has a telephone on her desk. She has a degree hanging by her desk. And she asked her teacher to please write the word lawyer next to her. And when the teacher asked her, Genevieve, please tell me about your picture, she said, well, this lady is coming to see me because she has had a problem and she needs my help. And that man is my assistant, which of course I got a big kick out of. But I want you to think about what that really communicates about Genevieve and how she's viewing herself, despite those difficulties with the conventions of writing. She's clearly told a powerful story. She's thinking about herself in the future and thinking about some goals and aspirations that she has and seeing herself as a very powerful and influential person. So I really want you to consider that and thinking about how do we get kids to that point with their writing. I'll tell you another story that came out of that same project. There was a young man, I think he was in 3rd grade, and we have really worked with this teacher on letting the children choose their own topics. Because one of the things that we know is we all do a better job of writing when we're writing about something we're passionate about. So she had started this writer's workshop, and she would tell the students when they came in, and they kept long lists of things that could be written about, and they did a lot of brainstorming. She said every time they would start writing, this young man would copy the alphabet chart that hung next to the ceiling around the classroom. And he did that for several days, and finally she thought, I got to find a way to move him forward. And so she said to him, why don't you tell me a story that you'd like to tell, and I'll write it down for you, and we'll work together. We'll collaborate on your first piece. And so he began to tell a story that he called the Hamburger Wars. And the Hamburger Wars was kind of loosely based on a Star Wars kind of theme, and they worked on it together. She eventually got him dictating into a tape recorder. And when the teacher published the Hamburger Wars book, she did it in a real cute way. She took like the outside cover of the book, the paper looked like a hamburger bun, and then, there was some cheese and meat and lettuce and tomato. And so all these different pages were parts of this hamburger that told this story. And so he wrote his first book. And then he wrote a sequel to the Hamburger Wars, follow-up story, again published looking like a hamburger. A little more elaborate, and he actually, during that second piece, took responsibility for some of the actual writing, doing some drafting of the text. So at that point, the teacher collaborated with the librarian and wanted to showcase some of the writing her students were doing. And I will remind you, this is a bilingual special education classroom. They set up a place in the library for the students to have their books so that other students in the school could come in and look at them. And one day, this little boy ran into the classroom and he slammed the door behind him, and he kind of stood there panting like this. And the teacher said, what is wrong? And he said, there is just a lot of pressure being an author. And she said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, anytime I walk down the hall now, the kids are like, well, when's Hamburger Wars 3 coming out? When's the next book coming out? And I just don't know if I can handle that kind of pressure. And so again, long way from I'll copy the alphabet off of the chart to I'm being pressured by readers of my work to produce another text. So with that said, let's talk about some of the things that we might do in this writing process. But before we do, I want you to think about yourself as a writer. So I want you to take the next few minutes, and I want you just to do some free writing about a topic of your choice. You can spend a minute or two, brainstorming some topics, some things you could write about, something that's on your mind today. We've had a lot go on this week in the news. Maybe you want to write about that. Anything you want to write about, and just do a little initial drafting. I'm going to actually end this video to give you some time to do that, and you can work on doing this before you move on to the next segment. But do a little initial drafting. If you're having a hard time thinking of something to write about, why don't you write about how you feel about writing? So you can either write about enjoying writing, or you can write about not enjoying writing, or the context in which you do and don't enjoy the writing process. So with that said, I'm going to end this, give you some time to do some writing, and we'll come back with part 2.